welcome everybody to what is now already our fifth virtual ethical innovation lecture. Today we start our lecture series for the summer term. And just a brief recap what this lecture series is intended to do. Well, we intended to help disseminate some insight and spread the word about initiatives or spark debate about actual research, all focused on the ethical and societal aspects of technology on a broad landscape. We are all particularly happy that you were all able to fit this lecture into your probably quite busy schedule. And in fact, the idea of this format is designed as such that interested persons that maybe do not read about the ethics of technology every day can have kind of a bite-sized introduction to several aspects and also meet interesting people and minds along the way. I'm very grateful that this lecture series is supported by the Academy of Humanities and Sciences in Hamburg. So thanks for that. And as always, also a quick word about us. We are the Ethical Innovation Hub, which is a research group that is a joint venture of both the Institute for Electrical Engineering and Medicine, where I come from, and the Institute for the History of Medicine and Science Studies. That is where Daniela Zetti is coming from, who will be moderating the discussion later in this lecture. We do research on how ethical considerations can be used as a kind of driver for innovation and how it can be integrated into technology development processes. And our today's speaker is also working in a project that is, I think, quite similar to ours, also to what is happening right now at the University of Lübeck. So let me briefly introduce him. Hermann Diebel-Fischer is a young academy fellow at the Academy of Humanities and Sciences in Hamburg and a postdoc at Dresden University of Technology, where he is the AI ethicist in the project for scalable data analytics and artificial intelligence in the consortium from both Dresden and Leipzig. He studied theology and general economics at Dresden University of Technology, where he also did his PhD in systematic theology. Since April 2018, he has been working in the research consortium Netz-Stabil, which is funded by the European Social Fund. And he's now left this project to work in Dresden again. He's also pursuing his habilitation from a systematic theological perspective and on the relationship between anthropology and technical progress. And furthermore, he is interested in the current role of technology with regard to societal challenges. And before we go into today's topic, let's have a brief look about what is upcoming in this summer term. So today we'll have Hermann Diebel-Fischer talking about ethics and quantification, where he will disentangle this relationship between the two. In May, we'll have Andrea Aller-Tubella talking about contestable black boxes. Then we have Aidan Pepin from the Ada Lovelace Institute and talking about the datafication and the boundaries of health. And finally, this term will be concluded by Rob Sparrow from Monash University, talking about high hopes for deep medicine. So that is all upcoming. I'm hoping that you find the time to listen to them as well, or at least have a look at the recordings and the highlights that we'll present. But for now, without further ado, I'd like to give the stage to Hermann Diebel-Fischer, and he will talk about ethics and quantification, disentangling a relationship. So I made you a presenter.
Okay. Thank you for your very nice introduction of myself. I need to share my screen. Okay, well then, yeah, let's dive right into it. Ethics and quantification, disentangling a relationship. With the digital transformation and ever more enhanced machine learning and thus increasing levels of automation, we create systems that are capable of acting and thus of deciding which path of action to take on their own. As living together with other entities that act, that is, up to now and for the foreseeable future with other human beings, as this is a complex process and needs coordination to achieve some sort of predictability, the cultural tool ethics was developed. The number of contingencies that we encounter decreases as people agree on rules to live by. Some of these rules were translated into laws, others are less formal, but still are agreed on. With new actors on the horizon, machines and robots that are imagined to live among us one day, we allow new contingencies to enter our world. But at the same time, we have the chance to design our new fellow creatures created by us, the human makers. The theologian and ethicist Christian Schwarke at the University of Technology in Dresden described the relation of human beings to these autonomous machines they create or that they want to create in analogy to the relationship of God to his creation. The creation is good, but what followed was that the creatures equipped with their own will presented the creator with some assumably unintended consequences. My talk today is structured into 5 parts. First, I will outline 2 very different and yet related approaches to ethics. Normative ethics, which is the kind of ethics that most people will think of when the term ethics is mentioned, and descriptive ethics, which is not about coming to judgments or decisions, but entails a hermeneutical approach to ethics, which is about understanding and interpretation. In the second step, I will show why it is relevant to explore the relationship between ethics and quantification. Although the concept of utilitarianism is more than 150 years old and its various flavors illustrate the need to refine this approach in order to make it work, this concept, at least in the continental European philosophical debate, never really flourished. Yet today, as technology advances and machines are being enabled to work autonomously, the idea of a calculus of happiness appears to be handy. To understand how ethics is related to decision-making and judgment, I will in the third section briefly illustrate the points at which ethics comes into the process of decision-making. This is important for my 4th step today. I will then elaborate on the anthropological dimension of ethics and humankind's relation to technology, especially to machines. The ability to act freely and ponder upon these actions is something that we, up to this point, only find in humans, as we as humans can be held responsible for our actions. The will to put ethics into machines, to render them moral machines, is nothing less than the will to humanify them, while at the same time a very human trait is being mechanized or made computable. This poses a problem which I want to explore. This problem will be looked at again in the 5th and final part of my talk, in which I won't offer a solution, but provide an outlook to ideas which could help alleviate the situation. So let's start with part 1. There are 2 fundamentally different approaches to ethics. Most textbooks offer a differentiation between moral ethics, normative ethics, and meta-ethics. But there is a third, sometimes neglected position, which is referred to as descriptive ethics. In normative ethics, we deal with theories and concepts of what is good and right and work towards decisions and judgments which are justified and then validated. In most cases, when people talk about ethics, they are referring to this field of normative ethics and ethical theories that lead us to decisions for moral problems. Whenever a moral problem is identified, a theory of the person's or the community's choice is employed to sort out the situation. The outcome is then double-checked against the criteria, and there is your answer to your moral problem. Prefer this option over that one according to ethical theory X, and you will do the right thing. That's it. You're welcome. But is it that easy? Are normal problems only about solving them? In a sense, yes. However, there are many obstacles which need to be overcome before we arrive at the situation in which we only need to do the math and it's done. If the world and our society was structured in a way that only the facts at hand needed to be considered or even computed, we would have automated ethical decision making a long time ago. Looking at textbooks examples for decision making, we often encounter algorithm-like structures which suggest A, that normative ethics is teachable or learnable, because B, normative ethics is a structured process where an input is processed, and as a result, we get an output that can be applied to our real world. And here you actually see a textbook example from Herle, who wrote a book about ethics or theological ethics, which is widely used. And what you have here is a algorithm-like structure that methodologically guides you through the way from identifying the problem to coming to an action that is ethically justifiable. Yet, when we look at moral problems which we encounter in our lives, we rarely find situations that are that easy to solve. In some cases, we won't even be able to agree on what the actual problem is, where it starts and where it has its boundaries. Understanding a situation, as the ethicist Johannes Fischer, Professor Emeritus from the University of Zurich, has emphasized, is important if we want to find a solution. With a hermeneutical approach to ethics, that is, with an approach that seeks to understand what the problem comprises and how it is related to the people who are affected by it, the complexity and multidimensionality of a problem becomes visible. That way, the algorithm-like structure to solve a moral problem will still work. Its results, however, will be of a rather limited use. That does not mean that ethical theories are useless. They are not, and neither is normative ethics. However, it is important to know their limitations and to know how a hermeneutical approach can help to get a broader understanding of what is actually going on. This leads me to my second part. Why do we need to talk about quantification? The endeavor to build ethics into a machine is best illustrated with a self-driving car with the ability to learn. Self-driving cars, as we have learned in the past 10 years, do not bring to mind a comfortable way of traveling, but the question, who should be killed? With large-scale experiments, such as the moral machine experiment, researchers wanted to find out how people all over the world decide if they encountered the situation of an unavoidable accident. There is no objective decision that we can deem as right in real dilemma situations. We can only step back and try to justify what we did, if we can talk about having made a decision at all. So in case you are in a car and somebody, or actually two people, step in front of you, you will never have the option to decide whether to kill the old man or the young woman. It is something that you would basically just do automatically, and nobody would say that there was actually a decision-making process going on in yourself. But a car with very, very many sensors is actually able to compute a decision and can translate that into an action. The examples that are mentioned and the will to collect the data and aggregate these data suggest that there could be a formula for the best decision. Utilitarianism, developed by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, can be regarded as the first approach to ethics that suggests a calculability of ethics. Bentham's philosophic calculus, in German, for the German listeners, das hedonistische Kalkül, aimed at, in the end, rendering ethics an arithmetic problem or a maximization or optimization problem. Without taking a closer look at what Bentham thought were suitable variables for this concern, we come to the problem straight away. When we want to make ethical decisions, a problem that can be solved by means of calculation, we implicitly assume that A, there is an outcome that can be regarded as a solution, and B, that this outcome is reached in a rational, methodological, and thus reproducible way. We can easily agree on A, that this outcome can be regarded as a solution, as we can simply define the outcome as a solution, which may not necessarily be the best solution, but a solution to a problem. Point B, however, is something that holds true for most ethical theories, but not for all. So, and to an intuitionistic approach to ethics, or the theory of emotivism, a theory that regards ethical sentences not as a proposition, a sentence that can either be true or false, but merely as an expression of attitudes that fails at being reproducible. We can thus ask, are moral choices always rational? That is, are they always based on reason? In the next step, let's take a look at when ethics enters the field of action. We can have ethics ex ante, that is before an action takes place or is carried out. We can employ it right at the moment when a decision for or against a certain path of action is being made, and ex post, that is afterwards. This is important because considerations which take place ex ante and ex post allow for a comparably large amount of time for ponderings, whereas right at the scene where an action becomes immediately necessary, humans, as opposed to machines, as I already mentioned, have little time to consider their choices. This holds true for dilemma situations into which the self-driving car is being placed, but in this experiment situation, you are not a self-driving car, you are a human who has to make the decisions that allows for data gathering in order to build a model. And also when humans encounter a conflict of duties, so that there are two things that they should do, we have a real dilemma, and there is normally not very much time to think about it. But again, when we have a machine doing that, then we have ample time to do the calculations if we know what is to be calculated. The ethicist Johannes Fischer describes what he calls moral significance of situations. We encounter a situation and intuitively we know what to do. We do not engage in reason-based ponderings when we see someone who needs help on our way to an important meeting. Only in anticipation of such a situation or afterwards do we have the capacity to engage in discussions about why one action is to be preferred over another one. Why is this relevant? When we want to equip self-learning systems with ethics, we need to find representations of what we think ethics is. The problem is human ethics in real life differs from the academic game of ethics. In real life, we hardly find any situation in which a human being solves moral problems, employing an ethical theory and pure reason. There are, however, people like Joshua Green, for example, who claims that all human decision-making can be traced back to some sort of utilitarian approach. But I don't think that that holds true. I mean, it's a theory that you could follow, but only from going through your own life decisions that you made in moral problems. You would find that you hardly ever used a real utilitarian approach that is maximizing the good or the utility for the greatest number of people. In the academic area, or more abstract, in a theory-based environment of ethics, we have all the time needed to gather the relevant facts and come up with a theoretical decision. Even if the latter approach was implementable into machines as a hard-coded basis for ethics, the decision-making progress would differ from the way the average human being decides. If we recall what I said at the beginning of my talk, the intentions of a creator who allows the creation to act autonomously may not be met in every case, or I guess may rarely be met. Even if we were to employ such a system, we would still feel alienated from these machines as they make their decisions maybe in a rational and methodological sound way, but also in a way that differs very much from the way we approach ethics in a non-academic, non-mechanized, non-machinistic fashion. Why then is it relevant to explore the relationship of ethics and quantification? If we choose to formalize ethics, to implement ethics into a machine, we construe ethics as an endeavor that can be formalized and moral choices as decision-making processes, which allow for expressing preferences by comparing, in the end, quantified options. Weighing two or more options will then become a weighing in a literal sense, even if we do not operate with absolute numbers, but with relative weights or relative numbers. To make two or more options comparable, we not only need to presuppose that they are not incommensurable, but also that there is a criterion which can be used to evaluate which choice is to be preferred over the other options. This means that better or of greater value needs to be the result of a judgment that is not an intuition or a gut feeling, but a result that allows for being translated into sentences like option B is to be preferred over option A. This requires that we can operationalize concepts such as justice, being beneficial, contributing to autonomy, and so on. When we discuss concepts such as these in deliberations concerning an ethical problem, we do not employ quantification in the first place, but look for arguments to defend our position, which does not really work in real life, but that cannot be discussed today. But if we do engage in such discussions, no quantification is needed because we have qualitative concepts and a shared or mostly shared understanding of them, which allows us to discern between various options and to put them into an order that represents preferences, even if no metric scale is being employed. We do not talk about ideas that we want to express numerically right away, nor do we refer to our bodily feelings in a way that can be expressed with numbers, as sociologist Steffen Mau has recently pointed out. But sometimes we refer to them employing quantification. So there is quantification, and we use quantification when we talk about things that do not come quantified right away. In doing so, we translate them onto a more abstract level for the purpose of illustration, or in fact to achieve a representation of a comparison that would normally employ only qualitative statements. The distance, if you want so, between two positions, how can that distance be measured? By assigning measurements to these positions. But the assignment of measurable symbols, the process of quantification, is something that needs to be taken into account in the ethical process. For humans, it is obvious that we deal with abstractions and ex ante or ex post rationalizations, but the machine can only deal with abstractions. The outside world, the representation of which in human ethics is already debatable, exists for a machine only always as an abstract representation. We know the difference and can make sense of it. Machines cannot do that as they lack a hermeneutic system allowing them to theorize interpretations. But machines are better at reasoning and sticking to decisions. This takes me to my fourth point today, to explore how human ethical considerations and machines are related. We need to talk about humankind and our relation to technology. Anthropological foundations from philosophy and theology are of great importance when it comes to sorting out our relation to machines. The philosopher Günther Anders coined the term Promethean shame 70 years ago. With Promethean shame, Anders means the feeling that humans have when they are aware of the perfection of a machine that can do most things faster, more precise, and so on, and find in comparison their own flawed nature. We as humans are born faulty constructions. When we go ahead and want to put ethics, a cultural tool which we deem valuable as it helps us to organize large groups of people with a shared background, but with different ideas on how the world should actually be. So if we want these groups to live together with little trouble, we presuppose two things. The first is we want machines to act and to decide the way humans decide. And the second is we see our own decision-making as something that resembles the perfection of a machine. And this is a contradiction. These two things do not go together. We want to mechanize ethics to make it computable in a literal sense in order to make it resemble how humans engage in ethical decision-making processes. But the very idea that human decision-making is computable neglects the computability of human decision-making in an ethical sense requires already a level of abstraction, driving us further away from what we want to achieve. The idea that automated processes need human oversight does not mean that those who demand this human in the loop think of humans as having superior powers in reasoning, but they want a human with human feelings to control and thus to validate the decisions of a machine, or they want to correct it. It is the human imperfection in the sense that our actions are not uniform and guided by a hardwired concept that is deemed valuable for an ethical decision-making process. The idea that ethics is an endeavor that is computable is based on an abstraction that goes far beyond the mere academic theory building, which is already an abstraction. It takes these theoretical frameworks to the next level by translating qualitative entities into quantitative ones for the sake of operationalization. I come to the fifth and final part of my talk. There's no remedy for this problem, but I want to provide somewhat a somewhat optimistic outlook. Translating qualitative into quantitative concepts will always result in the loss of something. But does this render the project to equip machines with ethics obsolete? No, and no for at least two reasons, and both reasons are based on anthropological observations. The digital transformation and the project to build machines which employ ethics in their decision-making processes make us humans once again ask ourselves how we do it, how our ethical system actually works. We know that we cannot understand us as machines without leaving out what makes us humans. Thus, the endeavor to humanify machines raises the question what the conditio humana, the human condition, really is. The second point is more challenging. Can we have counterparts which we want to live with, even if they do not perfectly resemble how we as humans engage in ethics? What are the conditions that we trust these machines with tasks for which we nowadays still ask for human control? So what is needed to trust a machine in decision-making? There's a long way ahead of us, but as complex autonomous systems are within the sphere of what humanity is able to create, we not only need to reconsider our relation to machines, but also we need to reconsider our relation to ourselves. It is the human imperfection which seems to make humans perfect counterparts for each other. And we need to find out how machines can also become perfect counterparts for humans, but that, as I pointed out, is something that lies ahead of us as a task that we all together in the field of ethics and technology need to elaborate on and take this program and solve it. Thank you very much.